पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं तं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तन्न विदुः सुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
Gurubhyo Namaha. We continue with chapter 3. Here is the essence of the verses 13 to 15. The translation and commentary by Maharshi Ji. Yagnasishtasinah santaha muchyante sarvakilbishahai bhujante te tu अघम पापाः ये पचन्ति आत्मकारणात्। अन्नात् भवन्ति भूतानि पर्जन्यात् अन्नसम्भवः यज्ञात् भवति पर्जन्यः यज्ञकर्मसमुद्भवः। कर्म ब्रह्मोद्भवं विद्धि ब्रह्म अक्षरसमुद्भवम् तस्मात् सर्वगतं ब्रह्म नित्यं यज्ञे प्रतिष्ठितम्. Here is the English translation. The righteous who eat the remains of the yajna are freed from all sins, but the unrighteous who prepare food for themselves alone, truly they eat sin. From food, creatures come into being from rain is produced food. From yajna comes forth rain, and yajna is born of action. No action to be born of Brahma, the Veda. Brahma springs from the imperishable. Therefore, the all-pervading Brahma is ever established in yajna. Now let us review the verse 12 where we left off. Satisfied by the yajna, the gods will certainly bestow the enjoyments you desire. But he who enjoys their gifts without offering to them is merely a thief. Here Bhagavan is saying, the fruit of every action is the response of nature to that action, and is therefore nothing but the gift of the powers of the nature, the gods. So Bhagavan is saying that one should not enjoy the gifts without offering to them, without transferring the ownership to these gods. Further, the prosperity and happiness that arise from the blessings of the gods, gained by means of yajna, should not cause a man to become engrossed in enjoyment to the extent of forgetting the source of his prosperity and abundance. And so Bhagavan says that he who undermines the higher forces in nature, the gods, and possessing himself of the field of action, which actually belongs to them, acts like a thief. And this is happening because he has not realized his true self, which is detached from activity. And anyone who has gained the fixity in being automatically remains involved with activity and is not attached to the activity. On the contrary, the one who has not gained this fixity in being, he assumes authorship of all actions and obtains ownership of its fruit, which in reality belongs to the nature or to the gods. And this is why such a man is called a thief, an usurper of possessions belonging to others. And so here Bhagavan is giving the warning that one should not be satisfied just with growth and material prosperity, wisdom and creativity in the relative field of life, but should aspire to go beyond this and achieve oneness with the eternal, absolute being in God consciousness. Then he is completely established at the level of life, underlying all creation, and automatically produces life-supporting influence for all the powers of nature, and also for the whole of creation. Now we come back to verse 13, and Bhagavan is continuing. The righteous who eat the remains of the yajna are freed from all sins, but the unrighteous who prepare food for themselves alone, truly they eat sin. I repeat again, the righteous who eat the remains of the yajna are freed from all sins, but the unrighteous who prepare food for themselves alone, truly they eat sin. And what does the remains of the yajna mean here? That which is left over after the performance of a yajna, or when the yajna has come to an end. Now let us understand yajna again. Yajna is action which furthers evolution from the waking state of consciousness to transcendental consciousness, and then from transcendental consciousness to cosmic consciousness, and further from cosmic consciousness to God consciousness. These are the different states which develop through different types of practices, and each practice in itself is a performance of yajna. I repeat again, these different states of consciousness develop through different types of practices, and each practice in itself is a performance of yajna. Evolution finds ultimate fulfillment in God consciousness, and once this is gained, the goal of yajna has been attained. And so, here when Bhagavan says the remains of the yajna, in its highest sense it is referring to the state of God consciousness. Now, we could also say the state of cosmic consciousness, which forms the basis of God consciousness, may also be said to be the remains of the yajna. And in the same token, the state of transcendental consciousness, which forms the basis of cosmic consciousness, is also said as the remains of the yajna. That which is left over after the performance of the yajna of transcendental meditation is bliss consciousness or the transcendental consciousness. And this is the remains of the first and fundamental yajna on the path to God consciousness, and this forms the basis of cosmic consciousness and God consciousness. So let me repeat this again. So here transcendental meditation is a yajna, and when you perform the yajna of transcendental meditation, then what is left over is the transcendental consciousness or the bliss consciousness. And this is the remains of the first and fundamental yajna on the path to God consciousness, and it forms the basis of cosmic consciousness and God consciousness. And he who partakes this bliss consciousness is righteous. That is what Bhagavan is saying, because in this state of his life, his whole life is transformed into a life without wrong, a life that is wholly righteous. Again, in this state, his life is transformed into a life without wrong, a life that is wholly righteous. And it is in this state that through every thought, word and action, he creates life-supporting influences for himself and for the whole creation, because he is established in eternal being, the basis of all life in creation. So Bhagavan is saying, transcendental consciousness being the remains of the fundamental yajna, transcendental meditation is the most important of the yajnas. Now, the wise man established in bliss consciousness is free from any sinful attitude because of the inner contentment which he experiences in the state of absolute consciousness. In contrast, Bhagavan describes those who concern themselves only with the affairs of their petty individuality and do not attempt to gain the unbounded state of the Absolute. These people, moved by their selfish thought, they forego the chance of higher evolution. Blinded by selfishness, their joys are only in the field of the senses. So Bhagavan is saying, they commit sin who do not work for their connection with the higher powers of nature or for their own evolution. And so here, when Bhagavan says, eat the remains of the yagya, he is prescribing the technique for rising above the influence of all sin. And this transcendental meditation is the primary yagya. Now, this is a metaphor explaining that the states of transcendental consciousness, cosmic consciousness, and God consciousness should be made use of in daily life so that actions may be free from sin. Bhagavan further means that if the mind has not completed the course of yagya, that is, if it has not taken a dive into the self and has not become connected with the Absolute Being, and if it has not realized the self as separate from activity, and if it has not attained God consciousness, then it is not attuned to cosmic being, and its activity is not attuned to the cosmic purpose. So again, Bhagavan is saying that the mind has not completed the yagya. If it has not taken a dive into the self, and it has not become connected with the Absolute Being, and not realized the self as separate from activity, not attained God consciousness, then it is not attuned to cosmic being and not attuned to cosmic purpose. Therefore, the actions are not wholly in harmony with the process of evolution. And under the circumstances, there is no certainty that a man's activity will be wholly right. And there is always the possibility of an element of sin. Now, if we take the state of cosmic consciousness, which comes before the God consciousness has been attained, every action fulfills the cosmic purpose and serves as a yagya. So, in cosmic consciousness, every action fulfills the cosmic purpose and serves as yagya. But if one has not yet attained cosmic consciousness and created a situation where the self is lived as separate from activity, then one's activity will not be graceful. It will be gripped or possessed by individuality. It will not have been set free to become universal. And Bhagavan is further saying, such activity does not belong to the dignity of cosmic life. When those who have not realized being as separate from activity engage in action, they appropriate the action to themselves, and in so doing, they are taking something which does not belong to them, something which belongs to their realm outside the self and which belongs to the cosmic life. So, they fall within the category of thieves and partake of what in the present verse is called sin. The individual self then has no right to usurp activity because activity belongs to cosmic life. And there is also a further consideration. Activity, when it is usurped, will actually damage the individual self by overshadowing its nature. The overshadowing of the true nature of the self, bliss consciousness, is the basis of all suffering, and that which causes suffering is called sin. Again, when there is overshadowing of the true nature of the self, which is also the bliss consciousness, then this becomes the basis of all suffering, and that which causes suffering is called sin. And so the present work also is saying that the association of the individual self with activity is sin, because ignorance is sin. Now, how can one be free from all sins? This can happen only when a man has become permanently established in the eternal freedom of absolute being. And then such a man alone is a righteous man. A man who is always right. Through all his activity, he produces life-supporting influences in nature because he has gained freedom from activity and his actions belong to the dignity of cosmic life. They naturally fulfill the cosmic purpose of evolution, and that is why they never fall into the realm of sin. And this is what Bhagavan means when he uses the word righteous. Now, what happens when a man has not become righteous? Such a person who has not become righteous, and if he has not placed his life in tune with the cosmic life of absolute being, then he may be committing sin in everything he does. So the only way out of the field of sin or the binding influence of karma is to come under the influence of the eternal freedom of absolute being. And this is the subtlest level of message of this verse. And further, the yajna, which is performed in a ritualistic way, refers to the gross fields of life, and it is at the more obvious levels. Bhagavan is further laying emphasis on the purpose of cooking the food because the quality of the mind depends upon the qualities of various factors such as food and environment and the experiences past and present which all have an effect upon it. The quality of food directly affects the quality of the mind, and this depends on many factors such as the materials themselves and the manner in which they were earned, whether this was legal or illegal, and also the manner of cooking and its purpose. So here Bhagavan again, while emphasizing the purpose of cooking the food, he says that if the food is cooked to be offered to God and eaten by a man after the offering has been performed, then the man enjoys the blessings of God by means of that food. And thus, the mind produced by such food will be pious, progressive, and graceful. Such a mind will certainly be quite naturally outside the sphere of sin. The contrary will be true, however, if the food is prepared without the purpose of making the offering, but with the sole intention of satisfying the man's own hunger. So here Bhagavan is making it very clear that food should be prepared for the purpose of offering to gods in the spirit of yajna, and eaten after the offering, and then he enjoys the blessings by means of that food. In the next verse, Bhagavan gives a graded sequence of creation. He says, from food creatures come into being, from rain is produced food, from yajna comes forth rain, and yajna is born of action. I repeat again, from food creatures come into being, from rain is produced food, from yajna comes forth rain, and yajna is born of action. Bhagavan says that individual life is born of food, implying that it has little to do with divine being, which is the self of all. It is born of food, of nourishment that does not belong to the field of being. All of the ego, intellect, mind, senses and body belong to the relative field of existence. Food likewise is born of rain, which again has little to do with divine being, divine absolute being. Here when we refer to as divine being, this is Paramatma, the divine absolute being. Let us understand this again. Yajna is born of action, and it is through action that a yajna is performed. Yajna is a performance or an activity of a specific nature whereby one becomes united with cosmic being. And this is the true meaning of yajna in the present context of a discourse on yoga. But it is important to understand that this interpretation should not be understood as detracting from the truth of Vedic action, the performance of the Vedic rites known as yajna. These Vedic rites are also important. The Vedas prescribe certain ritualistic performances by certain competent people to produce certain life-supporting influences in nature. This also results in gaining the sympathy of the laws of nature or the gods by creating an influence of harmony in the atmosphere and maintaining the rhythm of nature so that rain comes in due time for the production of food. So naturally, this type of yajna too is born of action, and it has action for its basis. Again, this type of yajna too is born of action, which is the ritualistic yajna, and it has action for its basis. This yajna then produces life-supporting influence in every field of creation, and as a result, the whole of nature remains harmonious. The sun shines in due time, rain falls in due time, and all the seasons remain regular. And this is how yajna comes to be regarded as a cause of rain, which in turn is responsible for the production of food. Now we see that the yajna can be on the gross level or on the subtle aspect. The more gross aspect of yajna is the performance of rites and rituals to please the higher forces of nature for the sake of material well-being, and it needs action in the gross field of life for its accomplishment. Likewise, the more subtle aspect of yajna, which is the process of contacting the transcendental divine absolute, needs action in the subtle fields. This action in the subtle aspect of life is the process of transcendental meditation, whereby the mind travels through all the subtler levels of existence and transcends the subtlest level of manifested life to reach the state of absolute being. So in this verse we are seeing the glory of action both in the gross aspect as well as the subtle aspect. Now Bhagavan continues, no action to be born of Brahma, the Veda. Brahma springs from the imperishable, therefore the all-pervading Brahma is ever established in yajna. I repeat again, no action to be born of Brahma, the Veda. Brahma springs from the imperishable, therefore the all-pervading Brahma is ever established in yajna. Now here Brahma is referred to as the Veda, And also the Brahma is also referred to the creator. In the previous verse, Bhagavan said, Yajna is born of action, and here Bhagavan is saying that all action, karma, and all knowledge of it is contained in the Vedas. The Vedas are an expression of eternal life. They expound the theory of action and everything pertaining to it, its causes and its effects. And this is the first reason why Bhagavan says that action arises out of the Veda. And secondly, it is understood that when we discover the origin of the Veda in the unmanifested, transcendental, eternal being. So again, the origin of the Veda is in the unmanifested, transcendental, eternal being. Now let us look at the manifestation of creation. Here, Veda is referred to as Brahma, and also the creator of the creation is also referred to as Brahma. The first manifestation of creation is the self-illuminant effulgence of life. Again, the first manifestation of creation is the self-illuminant effulgence of life. This is the field of established intellect or the individual ego in its own established state. And this self-illuminant effulgence of life is called the Veda. Please understand that this self-illuminant effulgence of life, which is the first manifestation of creation, is called the Veda. Now, the second step in the process of manifestation is the rise of what we call vibration, which brings out the attributes of the Prakriti or nature with its three gunas. So again, the second step is the manifestation as vibration, the manifestation of the Prakriti with its three gunas. And this point marks the beginning of the functioning of the ego. Here, experience begins in a very subtle form. The trinity of the experiencer, the experienced, and the process of experience comes into existence. And this is the beginning of action in the process of creation. So, try to understand this. Once the Prakriti with the three gunas is expressed, the experience in a very subtle form as the trinity of experiencer, experienced, and the process of experience comes into existence. And this is the beginning of action, because in the action all these three are needed: the experiencer, the experienced, and the process of experience. And this is the beginning of action in the process of creation. The very beginning of action in the process of creation. Now, just before the beginning of action, just before the beginning of this subtlest vibration, in that self-illuminate state of existence, lies the source of creation, the storehouse of limitless energy. And this source of creation is the Veda. This Veda is the field of almost absolute intelligence which underlies and pervades all activity responsible for the creation and evolution of life. And again, try to understand, this Veda is the field of almost absolute intelligence. Bhagavan is not saying it is absolute intelligence. He is saying It is almost absolute intelligence, and it underlies and pervades all activity responsible for creation and evolution. This, being the source of all creation, is said to be Brahma, the creator. So here Bhagavan is not distinguishing between Brahma and the Veda. He is saying Brahma or the Veda is naturally the source of all activity, and that is why the verse is saying no action to be born of Brahma. Bhagavan is further saying, certainly the divine is omnipresent and is therefore present in a latent form even in those things which are opposed to evolution, because he is omnipresent. But Bhagavan says here that divine consciousness Brahma is present in Yajna. He does not say that divine consciousness is present in actions other than Yajna. He is very specific. He is saying the divine consciousness Brahma is present in Yajna. Now here is an example. Every orange is meant to contain juice, but a shriveled orange does not yield any juice. So it is said that juice is present in a fresh orange. Even a shriveled orange has juice, but because this cannot be extracted, such an orange is not considered when juice is wanted. Likewise, divine consciousness can be developed through types of action which help evolution, and it cannot be developed through sinful or impious actions which tend to make the mind coarse and lead to inertia. And further, this robs the mind of its inability to transcend relativity and attain divine consciousness. So here Bhagavan is clearly saying that divine or God consciousness can be developed only through types of action which help evolution, and it cannot be developed through sinful or impious actions, because it makes the mind coarse and it makes the mind, brings inertia into the mind, and it does not allow the mind to transcend all of relativity to attain divine consciousness. So finally, let us try to understand Yajna again. Yajna is that which helps evolution. It is a way to all accomplishment in life, extending the meaning of Yajna to the fields of common life. It could be said that any action that helps evolution can be called Yajna. So this can be from gross to subtle. Thus we find that every Yajna is permeated with and gives rise to some degree of divine consciousness. Again, every Yajna is permeated with and gives rise to some degree of divine consciousness. In its higher aspect, Yajna is the way to cosmic consciousness and ultimately to fulfillment of life in God consciousness. And in its lower aspect, it is the performance of rites and rituals to win the favor of the gods. And this is the complete conception of Yajna. And so finally, Bhagavan is saying that all actions which fall into the category of Yajna carry divine consciousness in them. That means all actions which are benevolent and which are done with this Yajna spirit, they carry divine consciousness in them. Here ends the essence of these verses 13, 14 and 15, chapter 3, the Karma Yoga, and the translation and commentary given by Maharshi Ji. Here I will add a few words because it is in the context giving up selfish actions performed with egocentric desires create much of the mental agitations and suffering, and especially this is seen with Rajasika mentality. And because of this desire to have more and more of the greed, a lack of contentment is certainly not conducive to the yajna spirit. So one should give up this lower to gain the higher, which is the sattva, and work for a higher ideal beyond the self-centered interest. And this ideal could be the welfare of one's community, country, or well-beings. And the ultimate ideal is self-realization and gaining the God consciousness. The ritualistic yajnas also have a great significance, and these need to be performed by groups of people and the special pandits to help bring the harmony and balance in the environment, create peace for the environment and for the community and world at large. And these special yajnas are also done for many specific purposes for the individuals and for the community, and especially for the agriculture activities and for balancing the nature, balancing the seasons, and to bringing harmony. They are invaluable. And so also the yajnas to remove the obstacles, gain abundance, and bring harmony and peace in the environment. They are truly invaluable. So one should not think, that these do not have a place. Maharshi has these yajnas continuously performed for world peace in all the Jyotirling temples and also in the Shaktipeeth and in the Brahmastan. I will briefly say that it is important everyone works on a practical level with great responsibility and integrity and continuously be in this giving mode, how to help, how to enrich other person. And this giving and enriching can be on so many levels. And whatever one is doing, one should do it with great shraddha, with great discipline and authenticity. So give your utmost to every work that is being done. Give all that you have, your capabilities, your intelligence, your skills, your integrity. And this is the true yajna spirit, where you are sacrificing something that is lower to gain something that is higher. And you give and enrich others just with this notion that they are extension of you and that everyone is part of you. And so giving, helping and enriching another is enriching some part of you. And only then you can say you are doing something with this yajna spirit and you are enriching with the spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, where the world is your family. There is a lot of joy and bliss that enters one's being when you act out of sacrifice and selflessly to enrich others. So this spirit of yajna came from the rishis, where they brought large groups of people to do the yagyas together, so that there is this community or communal spirit for the welfare and harmony of all that existed. It is very important that we act with this yagya spirit and we keep enriching the source, the environment, and keeping it alive for the next generation. It's important to develop awareness that you don't touch or destroy anything that you can't replace, and especially the natural sources. Try to use everything that is natural and organic and renewable, and this is the true yagya spirit. If one does not follow this, then certainly if you are exploiting the nature, if you are destroying the environment, and if you are causing disharmony, then you are certainly robbing or stealing what belongs to everybody. And this is on so many levels: material, mental, psychological, so many levels. All of this automatically happens when one grows in consciousness, the cosmic consciousness and the God consciousness. Then the universality in the mind happens naturally. There is integration of the mind and the heart naturally, and there is the spontaneous right action and non-violation of the nature. So I end here. Jai Gurudev, Loka Samasta, Sukhino Bhavantu.
पदमवाप्नोति